Motor Mind. Hey folks, welcome back. Motor Mind here. So I'm doing another Scotty Giving video just because something had popped up here and I thought I'd have a little look. I haven't been doing a lot of these and it's kind of fortunate because I've realized that Scotty Giving isn't doing nearly as many repair videos. He seems to be doing more videos where he gives his own like review and personal opinion on vehicles, or he does history ones, he has done are half decent and pretty good, where it's just facts he just gives kind of and just kind of a backstory and stuff like that. I don't really have an issue even with him giving his opinions on vehicles. His own opinions is what he wants, and that's that. I don't really care. It's only when it comes down to these repair videos and just his lack of knowledge and his horrible diagnosis and repairs that I tend to have an issue over, because he's trying to show people of someone who has so much experience and such a professional, and yet he does quite a low quality job. Now in this video here I'm doing, he kind of lists off things like, he says that for mechanics should rip you off on the tricks. And I kind of find this rather rich, coming from Scotty, who I have pointed out in my previous videos is one who I wouldn't doubt is one of those people who rips people off. And why I say that is because how many times, just my previous video, if you look, he lists how much the TPMS sensors are on that Nissan Titan and says, oh, they're super expensive, which leads me to believe that he would charge somebody a lot of money for those, when I showed quite honestly they're about $20 a piece, and ordered to your door, right? He's also done this with another vehicle I think I put up about a year ago, where he says a window regulator was super expensive, and I showed it was about $20-30. And he's done this with I think there's another one he did on a I put up on a Mercedes SUV, and he claimed it was super expensive to try to fix this, and I showed that it actually wasn't. And so this leads you to believe that it's either he would charge a lot of money, and so he's saying this because, or he doesn't, or he over exaggerates it because he doesn't want to do the job, which means he probably would overcharge because he doesn't want to do the job, so he'd probably want to charge a lot of money to do that. So I'm going to run down through some of these points that Scotty Giving brings up about how he thinks tricks that mechanics do to rip people off. Because I do disagree, because I will point them out as we go through them. So let's get started here. Hey, don't forget to subscribe to my channel, click the like button, and comment down below, and let me know what you think of this video. And I'm trying to build this channel and see if I can actually start getting where maybe you can start paying a little bit of money, and then I'll start investing a lot more time and effort into this and see if I can grow it and even do better and do some more repair videos. But yeah, don't forget to hit that button and subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out a lot, and helps me to keep making more videos and try to up my quality. I'm up in my up in the value here, and I'll do more repair videos as and when I can. All right, thanks for watching, and let's continue on.
Ripped off by repair shops, then I'm going to show you some really common rip-offs and how you can avoid them. Now, one of the most common rip-offs is telling you need struts or shocks in your car. Now, sure, they wear out over time, but they have to be pretty far gone for you to actually need new ones, and guys are always trying to sell you them. You start with a lightweight car like this Matrix. They don't weigh much, so they can last a really, really long time. This is an 07. Still got the original ones on. Now, they do wear out, but here's how you can figure it out yourself. The strut mounts are on the top. The strut mount holds the strut together, bolts onto the frame of the car there. This rubber isn't ripped, and when we push it up and down, you can see the rubber isn't wiggling up and down. If it was broken, yeah, then you'd see the rubber move, and you'd have to replace at least the mount.
All right, so I'm going to start on this one here. That isn't 100% entirely true. It is more vehicle specific and depends on the manufacturer and how they've designed the strut mounting point and the struts themselves. Example would be where I live, we have Vauxhall cars, and like something like the Vauxhall Corsa has actually is designed to have a little bit of movement in the upper strut mount, and it actually has, there's actually a specification on how much an acceptable amount. It's designed in to be like that, so to have a little bit of movement up and down on that is actually a design feature. And if you were to replace that, you'd have, and it was fine, you'd have just the same amount, pardon me, same amount of play. And it's because that's designed, the mount is designed into that vehicle. It does sit, that tends to be more like when it's up and down. If it's sitting up in the air, so you'll have a little bit of up and down and side to side movement in those. So perhaps what he's saying about the Toyota Matrix, where it's supposed to have no play in that, that may be true for that specific vehicle, but I wouldn't take that as a general. And I think this where Scotty is doing this, is that he's doing generality for like this repair shops across the board on all vehicles. He's not being specific on the Matrix, and this is how to diagnose this, and he's being using the general, using the Matrix as an example, but using the generality across all vehicles. That isn't actually completely accurate. Also would say that if you have a movement in the upper mount there, and it is enough, normally you can hear it because you'll hear a bit of the knocking up and down, especially if you hit bumps, or you'll have knocking back and forth. That would be, see, that's not so much the strut, but so much the strut mount, which is a separate part. It is a serviceable part that comes off the that can be taken off the strut and replaced separately without having to replace your whole without having to replace your strut assembly and your spring and stuff like that. So when you're saying checking your struts and stuff like that, remember the mount is separate than the from the strut. It's a separate part. It's, you know, it's you know, well, it's you still have to remove the strut. It's mainly this, you know, same amount of labor. But it's probably the same labor cost. Parts cost cheaper most likely. But like I just like to point out again, it is vehicle specific. Some vehicles are actually designed to have a small amount of play in there. And mainly when the vehicle's been jacked up in the air and stuff like that, you'll tend to have that play there. When it's sitting down, you know, probably shouldn't have that much play. Maybe up and down a little bit. So I have seen sometimes where they'll have a little bit of flexion up and down, but even then, you probably won't see that. Even if, you know, especially with the weight sitting on the vehicle, you're not going to see that that strut mount banging up and down unless it's like completely collapsed, in which case then you're going to know, because you're going to have a lot of knocking and banging going on, especially going to bumps or a turn. Yeah, especially over bumps. Mainly what you probably have, to be honest, before you have that, you'll have a when you turn the wheel side to side, you'll either have a grinding or clicking or some sort of noise from turning your wheels, not so much going over bumps and stuff like that. 99% of the time when I've seen upper strut mounts collapse or start to fail, is that they actually are starting to make noise when turning the wheel, as opposed to actually having movement up and down. So just like to point that out here. You're most likely going to hear more noise when you're turning the wheels and thinking there's something going on there, before you'll actually have any kind of real movement in play. And that's because when you get movement in play, it's gone past that point, and now you're having, and you should have probably changed them, and you're ignoring a problem, and then it serves you right for having something go wrong, because like I said, he's probably been having noise for ages and just ignoring it. So I said, you know, if you leave things to wear out that point, things will progressively get worse. They don't tend to get better. So let's move on here.
And here's a simple test that you can check from the bottom. You just get a jack. Now as we jack it up, if you see these falling down, it means they're broken that way. But as you can see, we're jacking it up in the air. The wheels are now off the ground, broken off and fallen in. No, they're still solid.
I'd just like to reinforce, as I said before, some vehicles will actually have where it will kind of move down. And you do have to remember how the strut upper mount is designed is it'll have like a plate like this. It'll have bearings all around it like that. And it's designed to have the weight of the vehicle sitting on it, and it'll push up. So you will have some movement coming down because you're letting that off, and it'll have some play, which is still, like I said, can be designed into how the upper strut mount and stuff is designed, you are letting all that weight off, and so that will come down a little bit. That doesn't mean there's anything actually wrong with the mount or the strut. It's just that you're taking all that weight off that bearing, and so it's just coming down a bit and relaxing when it's supposed to be sitting up, and where it'll sit in the race, and where it tracks. So Scotty's saying that if it falls down, that it could be, it's a sign that it's worn. Not necessarily. And as I said, like an example, like the Vauxhall Corsa, it actually will have movement, and if you have it off like that, you can move that strut back and forth a bit, the upper mount, and that's completely fine. That is actually I can't remember the exact specification, but there is actually a tolerance, and to have been movement back and forth is in the design of the strut. If you were to replace the upper mount in the strut, you still have the same amount of movement in there, or have some, because that's how it was how the manufacturer designed that strut and that strut mount. So I just like to say that is not a definitive test. If you have a little bit of movement coming down, that could mean absolutely nothing other than the fact is that it's just relaxing a bit, and there actually is within tolerance to have some movement in that. So once again, Scotty isn't actually right. That's not correct. If Scotty is actually saying that doesn't mean that it's something wrong with it. Or it could be, like I say, it is down to the manufacturer. It is vehicle specific, and sometimes even model specific, because like a Vauxhall, a Corsa can have that problem, but I don't actually think the Astra had that. I think it was a different strut mount. So it comes down to, it is vehicle specific on model and make. And I'd probably say even year, because some model years may have one design, and then next model year may actually have something completely different. Depends if they've done a redesign, or they redesigned the suspension or whatever. So it can even be down to not only the make, but it can be year, make, and model on if the amount of movement is acceptable or not acceptable. And that's where having training and being a qualified mechanic comes in, because especially if you're a dealership, you'll actually have this specific knowledge. Well, you'll know if that's an acceptable limit or not.
That one to that one. And as we go to the other side, well, check this one out. Check it out. It's bone dry too. Now, this car's so old, you can see the dust shield here has ripped and fallen off. It's coming apart. It's just a dust shield. And as you can well imagine, it really doesn't do much of anything, because this one's been ripped for over 6 years, and the dust hasn't got in and ruined the seal, so it's leaking, so it's not leaking. Now, the reason that I didn't put another dust shield on is this. I would have to take the entire assembly off. I would have to take the strut mount and the spring off, put a new dust shield on, put it back together again, which I am not going to do for something as stupid as a dust shield. Now, on the other hand, if I was doing a strut job, I saw this is ripped, I would buy a strut, and I would buy a dust shield rubber boot that goes over the top.
Now, not just, not going to be completely negative on this one. I do agree with Scotty on that one there. If the dust shields, sometimes they do deteriorate, especially the soft rubber ones, and it's not worth it definitely isn't worth replacing, going through all this trouble of replacing that shield just for the sake of the shield. I have seen, as Scotty said, I've seen loads of vehicles come in, rip dust shields and stuff like that, and that little boot, and the strut be fine, and we strut fine for a long time. As we said, you wait until the strut has, like, it's worn out, but the seals are starting to go, and honestly, the time it takes to do that all depends on where you live and the mileage and the type of driving you do. If you live in an area where it's got a lot of road grime, like I say, maybe up in Canada or something like that, where and they do a lot of salting on the roads and a lot of gravel and stuff like that, then you're going to probably get a lot more stuff up in there, especially if there's salting. It will get up in there, it will wear those seals out a lot faster, as well as you're getting a lot more temperature variations. You're getting the cold, you're getting the hot, so struts will wear a lot quicker than if you live somewhere like where Scotty lives, or more in the southern states and stuff, where it's a lot more tempered climate, and you're not getting all that salt and gravel and stuff on the roads and stuff like that, especially in winter time. And you're not going to wear as fast, because you're not getting as much contamination onto the shaft, where it's going to start eating up the seals. Now, most struts, when you buy a strut, they come with a new one of those shields anyways, because a lot of times the strut manufacturers know that those shields, if they're not completely deteriorated, they're probably on the way. And so most of the struts I've ever done, they've always come with the new boot that goes on there. So it's not actually a real big deal. You don't see you buy, both. Normally, if you buy a strut, it comes in new boot anyways. So just stick it on, and happy days. So that's why it's so you're gonna replace it anyways. You replace that strut, but like you said, it's not worth taking a whole assembly apart just to replace that boot. Your best just wait until you need a new strut, because it's gonna come with the strut anyways. So let's move on.
Now, it's not a perfect seal anyways, it just sits there, so it's not all that important. But if you're going to do the job, you might as well do it right. It doesn't need struts, so I'm not going to do it. But eventually, when they do wear out and start leaking, yeah, I'll get a new strut, and I will get a new rubber boot to keep the dust off. Now, one of the main reasons I'm showing you how to check it is because of this. A crooked mechanic can have a little bit of spray oil. He can spray oil on here and then say, oh, look, it's leaking, it's leaking.
Now, I myself have worked in this industry for a long time, in a lot of different places, and I don't think I've ever seen a mechanic ever do that. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm sure there are some crooks out there, as there are in almost every industry, who are just trying to, scam people out of money. That being said, even if somewhere, let's say a mechanic or technician, whoever, if a shop were to spray stuff on there to try to say that your shocks are leaking, a quick bounce test is a fairly good indicator to see how worn the shocks and struts are. If you bounce it and you push it down and the vehicle goes down, up, and it settles, that's fine. Even if they say, oh, look all the oil, you can just turn around, and the best is to say, look, if let's just say if they are, and you can say, look, this spray some brake clean on there, and I'll monitor it from there. Brake clean will wash all that off. If you sprayed that on there, brake clean it off, it'll come off. And then you can say, I'll monitor it. If I notice they're leaking that bad, I'll have them replaced. Remember, you always, if you think the shop's a little dodgy, then just walk away. Okay, unless it's something that you think that they can show you is dangerous. Like I say, your brakes are like metal to metal. You got broken suspension, steering part, tires are like cords are showing, or they're bald. Unless they can show you something, and you're always more than welcome to say, look, like the mechanic says something and you're questioning it, then all means ask to see it. Any reputable shop will be more than happy to show you, because they're going to stand behind their work, stand behind their diagnosis, and say, look, this is what you need, this is how it is, and the leaking, and I'll even show you, look, the bounce test, you can see that it's actually starting to compromise the ride and stuff like that of your vehicle. It's always, if you want to question any mechanic, any guy who's like of any kind of salt that's going to stand behind their diagnosis and is a reputable shop and mechanic, is going to stand behind their work and be more than happy to show you. And that's what a lot of times, word of mouth. And if you're not sure, if you find a good shop that you trust, and you have friends or family that have used them and they've always had a good experience, it's always very good indicator of knowing if a shop is, if you can trust them or not, and you build a relationship with your mechanic and your shop. That's, that's normally how most mechanics like to build a reputation. Is word of mouth is normally the best advertisement in the industry, and to build a rapport with your customer, that they're going to trust you. That if you say, if I were to say to my customer, you need something, I've built the rapport enough to know that if I say it needs it, they're going to trust that it needs it, because I'm not going to try to rip them off. I'm going to be completely honest with them. If I say it needs it now, or it's going to need it in a month or two, 6 months or a year or whatever, and that's normally what I do. And most places, mechanics I've worked with are honest guys who are just trying to do honest work, and that's exactly how they work. Like I say, if you suspect that, do the balance test. If it seems fine, and you can do each corner, and it should all be about the same, because all struts should kind of are designed that the vehicle should bounce and act the same. Then you'll know each corner. If you know one of the corners moving a bit more, you can say, okay, that is leaking because it's the seals and stuff are starting to go, and it's actually allowing fluid to escape out on the shaft. So that's normally a very indicator if they're having it off or not. So, but I said, the time I've worked in this industry, I've never seen mechanics do that. That's because that's just, you get caught doing that, and then suddenly your whole reputation is usually shattered there. If you're working for yourself, or if you're working for a shop, then suddenly you're pushing your toolbox out the door and into the back of a truck, and you're going home. So, as most shops are not put up with trying to rip your customers off. All right, let's move on.
Well, before you go to any garage, just take a picture of the struts, right? And you see they're dry. Then if they say, look, they're leaking, and they show you they're wet, they're crooks who sprayed it on, don't deal with them and report them to the Better Business Bureau. I've seen people do this for ages and ages. So just check it yourself. It's so easy to do. Now, this car rides fine, so I know there's nothing wrong with the struts, right? If you have a really, really old car and it's worn, it'll bounce up and down, it'll bounce up and down. Then you know the struts are worn. You could push on the car, it'll bounce up and down. This doesn't bounce at all, there's nothing wrong with them, right? But today's cars, the more modern ones, they might not necessarily bounce up and down all that much, but this is what will happen when they're...
No, most modern vehicles, if they have a conventional McPherson strut system, will bounce up and down. And you can quite easily tell, like I said, you should be able to push up and down on it, let it go, and you should see it go down, come up, and settle. Okay, if it goes up and down a couple of times, struts are worn out. Unless you have like something like a Mercedes, Audi, Range Rover that has an air suspension system, which is, and where is different, or let's see, some French vehicles like that, some older ones like they had a hydropneumatic system. That's a different, completely different kettle of fish there. And then there's different ways of testing that. But if you have a conventional vehicle with a conventional McPherson strut system in the front and other McPherson struts in the back, or you have shocks and springs or whatever in the back, then the bounce test is a completely legitimate and very quick and easy way to tell if shocks are starting to wear and compromise your ride. So Scotty's actually wrong on that. Even I've done it right up to brand new vehicles. They well, let's say brand new, fairly new vehicles where they've where the shocks and struts are starting to wear down. Then that is a completely legit and quite simple and quick, easy way to look into and test a vehicle like that. I've done where I work, we have any vehicle over 3 years old. I think after a certain age, it's now 4 years old. They have a yearly test, and one of the quick ways of checking the vehicle is go around each corner and do the bounce test, and that gives you an indication that there's something wrong, and then you can look further into it. So yes, that is a way of checking even modern vehicles, and so Scotty's actually wrong on that. Modern and brand new vehicles will still bounce up and down too many times. Will as much as an old like 1970s Cadillac? Probably not, but then you're looking at a vehicle that weighs like 4 or 5 tons compared to a vehicle that weighs 2.5 tons. And like I said, and maybe a different system, but it's knowing, okay, maybe the vehicle won't bounce up and down loads of times. It'll bounce up and down a few times, but it's more than it should be. Like I said, it should be balanced. It should go down, up, and settle. And that should be it. This is as much as it should move on a modern vehicle. Anything more than that, bounce down. And the bounce test indicates that the shocks are starting to wear and are compromised in ride, and actually down could be safety of the vehicle.
They're actually warm. Driving down the road and the steering wheel will be fine, so they ain't going 50, 60 miles an hour. But then when you hit bumps, it'll start shaking and rattling, and when you get to a smooth road, it'll smooth out.
Now that test there where Scotty's brought that up, if you're driving along and then you hit a bump and then your steering wheel starts shaking and rattling, I would say that's an indicator of something more than just a worn strut. If you're getting that kind of moving, you hit it and everything's shaking and rattling like that, then you're most likely to have something worn out. You have ball joints, you got bushings, like lower control arm bushings, or you got some steering issues, steering component issues that are worn out. They shouldn't be doing that. Even if you have a worn strut, and I've driven vehicles with like struts completely freaking knackered out of them, and and where I live, there's tons of freaking potholes and stuff like that. In fact, some of the side roads here have speed bumps going down the road, designed in to try to keep your speed down. And I've never had a vehicle with worn struts that have actually caused that. Not with just a worn strut. Normally, it's, if it's a worn strut, there's other things worn out, and that's what's causing it. That's where you're causing the steering suspension to move in and out. You got something going wrong. But never just a worn strut itself wouldn't cause your steering wheel to be going shaking all over the place. That's it may cause your vehicle to bounce up and down, and maybe a dip on one side, but it's not going to cause your steering wheel to go back and forth. Scotty's completely wrong on that. That never happens. So he's talking a load of crap there.
Again, that's a dynamic test you can do yourself, but you always do have to also make sure that your car is structurally sound, because it may not be the struts. If it does that at high speeds and starts bouncing around, it can be something in the front end. So
it most definitely is something in the front end, and it wouldn't be just struts. It'd be something other than, so you have lower control arm issues, other ball joint issues. You got other kind of mount issues. Like I said, you got like bushings and stuff like that, rear bushing, front bushing starting to go, or you got some other issues going on. I wouldn't say it's a strut issue. I'd say more likely it's going to be a steering or a lower suspension. It's going to be something more like those kind of issues that's going to cause that. I suppose, if perhaps your vehicle, if it's got some sort of structural damage, yeah, of course that would definitely cause it. If you have a steering rack mounting issue, subframe frame issue, yeah, of course that would completely cause something like that. But like, if that's the issues, you got much more to worry about than just a worn strut. So in which case you probably know about this and you should have it fixed, or because you've obviously done some structural damage, or as I said, or you got more going on than just shocks, than just worn out shocks and struts. You got, like I said, you got some steering and mounting issues that's causing some massive problems that you need to get fixed right away. If you're hitting the bumps and it's at speed in vehicles, like steering wheel shaking all over the place, then there's a lot more going on, and you need to get that looked at immediately by a reputable shop.
So you can always do this test. 3 and 9 o'clock, pull on it. If it wobbles, you probably got a bad tie rod. And then 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock. If you pull on it, could be a ball joint or something's one.
Or side to side, where he's shaking back and forth, 3 and 9, that will indicate, will help you diagnose if you have an inner or outer tie rod end that's starting to wear out. As well as I've actually seen where it's lower control arms, where you got a rear bushing or something like that, where it's gone. I've actually have felt that completely doing the 9 and 6 o'clock. And normally it's just down to experience and knowing how to feel it. Depending on where your tie rod end attaches on, let's just say if it attaches more at the front of the spindle, and you can feel it more in the front, then it's normally the tie rod. And if you can go back and forth, you can feel more of the shaking at the back. Then this tends to be more of the rear bushing for lower control arm or upper control arm. Depends on your if you have a wishbone suspension, or if you just have a McPherson strut with the bottom with a bottom control arm. And that is completely fine. As for the top and bottom, sometimes that can actually indicate either you have an upper mount issue. If you're not supposed to have any movement, you can get that, where you can feel the upper mount moving back and forth. If the vehicle's not designed to have that, that's a good indicator you have a strut mount issue. And that sometimes can do the lower ball joint, but not always. Sometimes with the suspension pushing down, depending on how your ball joint attaches, if it attaches on the bottom where you have a pin going up, or if it attaches from the top and coming down, depends on how your suspension is. That doesn't always work. And another way he doesn't mention in this is to stick a bar underneath and lift up slightly on your on the bottom of the wheel, and and when you lift up, it can actually help to show if they takes the weight off, just enough off that ball joint. And if you have movement up and down, you can feel it clunking up and down. that's also an indicator that you have a worn lower ball joint or upper ball joint. Like say if you have something like a system on Audis, or they have the or BMWs, they have like multiple different attachments. You have to kind of you have to have like a pry bar and move up and down, and you can feel if there's something's loose and there's different bushings and stuff like that. Or say Hondas have their dual wishbone suspension, and that is also a valid test to do. And you lift up and down, and then you can test different ball joints doing that for your different control arms. So just the up and down, shaking side to side is a good basic test, but you do need to actually sometimes, if depending on your vehicle, once again, on how the design of the steering suspension is, that you may have to do additional tests and know how to do that. Once again, this is where having being a trained mechanic, trained technician with specific with specialized training, it comes into benefit, because you'll know how to test these and what to look for. And that's where it is to have years of experience and years of training and updated training every year, because suspension does change, and new models and new model years and different manufacturers come out, and you need to kind of know the specifics on how to test these systems properly and what to be looking for. That's why sometimes the average driver, that's why you can't, a lot of times you can't diagnose these things. You need to take it to a qualified mechanic who actually has had years of training, years of experience, and is normally getting updated current training and experience to know how to look at and test and diagnose these systems correctly. So yeah, that's this is why this industry, it's every year it's just changing. I say it's in fact, it's sometimes even every 6 months a new model comes out. You get halfway through and they've decided to change something. Continuously learning, continuously updating. You can't just be sitting idle working in your backyard and think you know everything about cars, like Scotty Kilmer, who it's very obvious he actually doesn't, and I've proven this time and time again.
But if it's straight like this and it's not wobbling at all, and you do start to lose control when you hit bumps on the highway, you're going to need new struts. And also look at your tires. These are evenly worn. There's the same wear the whole way across. If it's all cupped on one side or the other, that could mean that your struts are wearing out too. You notice this little dot here? Okay, that's a tire plug. I put it on over 6 years.
Just because Scotty's pointing that out, this is a real quick one there. Where that tire plug now, just to give professional opinion, tire plugs are actually not designed to be a permanent fix. They're supposed to be an emergency roadside fix. In a lot of jurisdictions and stuff, areas, and including where I live, that would actually be seen as an illegal repair. And if you're seeing that on inspection, that would be automatically, you'd be pulled. And also, where he's put that is really bordering on almost a shoulder, where I know he said it's held up for years and it's been fine, and it may be fine, but I'm just like to point out that it's on the shoulder where you have the cords that he's probably just in those cords, but I mean that is really bordering on repairable and not repairable. Let's see, he said that's been there for years, and I have seen plugs hold up, but I also have seen tire plugs blow out as well. Quick example, I had got a car dolly, friend of mine, off of U-Haul. We noticed when the tires was getting a bit low, so we stopped at a gas station, threw some air in, and tire plug popped out the freaking tire. And we were stuck at this gas station and with a flat tire in the middle of halfway on our journey, and we actually had to go and get a new tire to put on, because it was in a place where it wasn't actually in the cords, and it wasn't going to hold up, as well as we were not equipped to be putting tire plug back in. So and that's probably been there for a few years, for all I know. So we only had rented this thing off of a U-Haul. So that's an example of they sometimes can fail, and that one there was obviously failing when we had got that, unfortunately for us. But yeah, where he's put that, I was like to say it's probably right bordering on maybe that tire wasn't repairable, but so far he's getting away with it, and it's his vehicle. He can do what he likes. But I just like to point out that tire plugs are not a permanent repair. They're only for a temporary repair to get you somewhere where you can get a proper patch put in. And where he's put that is, it's kind of right on the shoulder where he may have just been on the cords, but that would be kind of a shifty area. If I were looking at doing tire repair, I'd have to look closely, but I'd probably tell the customer that that's probably best just to have it replaced, because there's no guarantee that that's actually being the cords and it's going to hold. So yeah, let's like to comment on that one.
Years ago. Now another item that's really oversold is brake pads and brake rotors. People tell you need a brake job. Way more than you often do. It's so simple. And for this, I'm using this cool little new air compressor I got. It's small and it's oil free, but we're going to see how it works because it does have 2 cylinders, so it can pump pretty fast. So I'll take off the tire and talk about brakes here. We'll just pull off the wheel and see how that little compressor works. So far, so good. Hey, it works so good it didn't even have to turn itself on. That little air tank was
Scotty being Scotty, who's apparently a professional. Yeah, did you notice in there any jack stands on that side holding that vehicle up? I didn't, which means he's probably relying on just hydraulics to hold that that side of the vehicle up. For any kind of professional mechanic, that's a big no-no. You do not rely on hydraulics. You should have a jack stand underneath the lift point that should be right underneath that door, just behind the wheel arch. There should be a lift jack stand, jacking point there. And yet I see nothing, so I'm assuming that he's just got a little hydraulic jack underneath there holding that that side of the vehicle up. If he's trying to be a professional and try to give professional advice, or try to show people how to properly do stuff, he really should be doing the basics, as in health and safety and making sure that things are secure and done correctly. But as I've like to point out before, I don't think Scotty is actually a real professional. He's just a backyard mechanic who just claims to have a lot of experience. But as I said before, I think it's just experiencing him working on doing little side jobs for people and pretend to be a professional, but he's not. He's a backyard mechanic, and his workmanship and his lack of safety and this basic shows.
Was enough to take off the wheel. I gotta say, it's a little tank, but it took off one wheel without even running itself.
So I'd like to point out, well, that compressor seems okay for maybe just doing one tire or one wheel off with nuts that aren't particularly tight. It's just a small tank. It's only going to hold a very limited amount of pressure before the pressure is going to start dropping off, and it's going to have to try to build pressure back up, which means if you try and take off anything that's a bit tough, that's like a axle nut or something like that, with your impact, you're going to lose pressure really fast and lose impact strength very quickly, and probably have a hard time. So well, it's probably fine for like a DIY, somebody who's just working on their own little own vehicles, just take your tires off, put your tires on, and on like a small car like that Matrix, it's probably fine for that. If you want anything bigger, we work on like a 3/4 ton, 1 ton dually, where the tires are much more you have many more, you have a lot more nuts, wheel nuts, and they're much tighter. That little compressor is most likely going to start to struggle, and you're going to be probably fighting a lot to wait for the pressure to build back up, as well as you may have a hard time with your impact's not going to get as much pressure it needs to run. It's only push so much CFM. It's a small tank, and it's going to run out of steam very quickly, and I doubt it's going to actually be able to hold enough to really for the impact to have its full power potential. That's it for what he's used it for there. It's probably all right, but I wouldn't count on it for anything more than maybe just that Matrix taking the wheel nuts off and on, and maybe doing some tiny little small bits, or using it to for like the blow or something like that. But that's about it. Just like to point that out. It looks like it's an okay little unit, but I said, if what I've used in my videos where I have my little DeWalt battery operated one, that's the way things are going now in the future. It's much that the batteries hold a long time. They'll hold. I have full impact right up to almost that battery is dead because it's a lithium ion, so it'll give me full full power nearly right up to the end. It lasts a long time, as well as not. Obviously don't have a hose, and not restricted so much. Just like to point that out, that's okay, but I wouldn't. It's gonna run out of power quickly, so yeah, it's not the best unit.
Guys are forever trying to sell brake jobs. If your brake pedal does not sink, if it's nice.
Listen, I can tell you right now, if your brake pedal sinks, like if you push your brake pedal and it starts sinking further down, you do have a brake problem, and most likely it's hydraulics. You're losing, you got air in the system, and you're either losing hydraulic fluid or air is getting into your system. Your brakes, even if your brakes go right down the middle nearly, your brake pedal should not be sinking to the floor unless there is a problem with your braking system. So Scott is saying that. I don't know why he's saying that's just a little shite right there right now. Your brake pedal should always feel about the same, right down. I've worked on many vehicles. I've had many vehicles, and my brakes, the only time you really know that they're starting to wear out is the wear indicators. Either you have the electronic one that goes and you have something pop up in your dash to say your brake pads are low, or you have the little squealers on the sides that start making noise, they start touching the disc slash rotor, and then they start and that's usually indicating to you that your brake pads are now at the point where they need to be changed. As for even your rear, if you have drum brakes should be self-adjusting, and it should be the same thing. And that if you have any brake pedals start going down, you either have a wheel cylinder or caliper that's starting to fail, it's letting brake fluid out, or you have a line that's starting to that's let go, that's seeping, or you have something else wrong, or you're losing brake boost pressure. So yeah, him saying that if your pedal's sinking when you're hitting the brakes and your pedal starts sinking or it's going way too far down, then you have a problem with your braking system and you need to have it looked at immediately.
Nice and hard. And when you're on the highway going, say, 65, 70, and you hit the brake hard, the steering wheel doesn't shake. And you look at...
If you hit the brakes, you're going down the highway, you hit the brakes, and your steering wheel shakes, you either have a steering suspension issue, or you have, or your discs slash rotors, where we live, are warped. And they tend to only normally warp is if they've overheated to the point where the metallurgy, sorry, hard to get that out, is starting to change, where you have hard and soft spots, and the rotors are starting to have done this around the sides. That's normally also an indication that you've had a problem. Either you have a caliper that's stuck on, or brake pads that have jammed on, or something has happened where it's caused the pads not release enough, and it's kept the pressure on one or both rotors, depending on what's happened, and you've actually compromised the structural integrity of those discs. So if you have that, then you have a problem with your braking system, as well as you need to replace those discs, because those discs are now have the structural integrity of those discs have been compromised. If you leave that, obviously not only are you going to have to shift the shaking like that, but you could actually also risk where you could have a disc where it's going to start cracking, because you're going to have hard spots, you're going to have high spots and low spots, and they are going to change. You'll actually see where it's starting to blue. So that's an indication that you have an issue with your braking system that's caused those discs to overheat, or in the odd time where you've somebody's like you've rode the brakes that much that you've actually caused those discs to overheat, which case then it's your own damn fault, and well, you've ruined your discs. So up to you. But either way, those do need to be changed, and normally if that's happened, you've probably also freaking wrecked or glazed the crap out of your discs, out of your pads. So they're either going to need to be, depending on how much it is, either serviced or replaced themselves.
At the brake pads, and they're still pretty thick, right? If they get thinner than like a dime, yeah, it's time to change them. But even then, it can still go 10,000 miles or more.
Listen, if your brake pads get that low that Okay, to get to like a dime. Now here's something that's close to a dime, right? Right, so I'm gonna show you that thin, right? That's super thin. That's extremely thin, right? And you're saying you can go to 8 to 10,000 miles on that much brake pad? Bullshit. No. For one, they're going to wear faster because it's not going to dissipate heat as fast. Every time you use that heat's going to stay in that a lot longer, and now you have a lot less material. It's going to heat up. It's going to burn off a lot faster. Can you 8 to 10,000 miles on that much brake pad? No. Do not do this. For one, you could actually, that heat's going to stay in your discs longer. You could end up warping them if you haven't already. You're going to put a lot more wear on them. And two, that's not going to last 8 to 10,000 miles, okay? Unless you're driving just highway and then you're gearing down and coasting and maybe only using your brakes at the very, very end. As you've coasted right down to the end of the stop, maybe, but who does that? Nobody does that. That's just a load of shite. Also said it's that's not going to dissipate heat very much, and heat is built up and breaks very, very, very fast. And we have less material means you have less heat, and it's gonna less heat absorption, and then it's also going to move into a backing plate, and it's going to go into your calipers. And then it'll actually transfer into your brake fluid and stuff like that. You can bring your brake fluid up faster. So note to people, get your brake fluid changed on a regular basis. There actually is a service interval on brake fluid, and that does need to be done, or it can actually cause problems down the road where you can have seals start going, calipers start going, as well as brake fluid is hygroscopic, and it actually will absorb air out of the system, out of the air, water out of the air, pardon me. And it does have a service life on it, so make sure you get your brake fluids, brakes flushed, and new stuff in on a regular basis. Look up your service intervals on that. But no, you're not going 10,000 miles on that much brake pad. And most likely you're going to have had your squealers are going to be squealing the crap out onto your rotors, on your discs, or you're going to have the indicator, if you have the electronic one, it's going to be showing up in your dash. It's probably showing up for a while because that's way past service life of what you should have for brake pads. So don't listen to Scotty. He's talking shit. That's not right. You're not going 10,000 miles on that, and nor should you be doing that. Get your damn freaking pads changed. They're not that expensive. As well as also will compromise your how much braking distance and stuff you can actually have. That will actually have a factor on that, because those pads are not going to be as efficient as they should be.
But you might as well change them now. But it doesn't shake at high speeds, and when you look at the rotors, they look fine like this. They always get superficial rust, but up north, a lot of times you'll see the inside will be all rotten away from the salt on the road. If it is all rotten away, yeah, you want to change the rotors. But if they're solid and they don't shake on the highway, you don't need pads. You don't need anything.
Once again, Scotty's completely wrong on this. Discs / rotors do actually have a minimum service thickness that they should be being used at, as well as you'll start to get a lip on the outside of that, which will cause noise and stuff as well. But even then, there is a minimum thickness of your rotors / discs, and when you get to under thickness, then it's they need to be changed, and they need to be measured correctly. There's a gauge that actually can go on there and it'll measure, and then there's a minimum service thickness of the front discs, as well as rear drums. There's a maximum amount allowable that can go out before they need to be replaced. So him saying if it looks fine, it's not causing shaking. It's not causing shaking because they haven't overheated yet. But if you allow them to go too thin, then your discs will start to warp, because once again, it has to do with heat and being able to dissipate the heat correctly. If you have less material and discs do wear down and do under a thickness, then the heat can dissipate. It's going to stay in there longer, and it's going to start affecting how structural integrity of that metal, as well as your braking distance, because the heat's going to build up faster and it's going to cause brake fade. So do not listen to him on this. Look, if it's not causing shaking, they may look fine, but have them measured. They should be measured when you have a service, at least once a year, if not more. Normally a front discs and pads, normally a front, depending on what kind of vehicle you have, because obviously high performance vehicle, and people tend to drive them faster, brakes can work quicker, and how we drive, what kind of driving you do, how you drive your vehicle could affect it. But normally a set of discs should last 2 pads to probably 1 set of discs on fronts. The backs should be will be a little less, because you have less braking force in the rear end, as well as you tend to have less weight. So that being said, have them measured when you get under are very, very close to the minimum surface thickness, disc thickness. Then have them changed out. This is to make sure that the brakes work efficiently as they should do, as well as to stop, because if stop them having problems down the road, it can either warp or they overheat, and it can actually cause fractures to start showing up in the face of the disc, because the metal starts to expand too much, and actually can cause microfractures. And worst case scenario, they will fail. And so no, don't matter how it looks, and if it's not causing pulsing, then all that means is that the discs haven't overheated yet, but they still actually do have a minimal surface thickness. And have them measured by a mechanic, and make sure that they're within specification. And if they're close, I usually tell if they'll survive another set of pads, and they had to have pads and discs done. Or if they're not, if they're too close, then they may say no, you're gonna need to do new discs, and normally throw a set of pads, depending if you have pads very, very recently done. Okay, fine, throw in a set of rotors slash discs at it. If your discs, your pads are fairly worn down, throw a whole new set of discs and pads at it, and that way do not mess around with braking. Okay, like braking is very, very important. Okay, don't be messing around. Don't be listening to Scotty's shit advice. Get the stuff, make sure it's done right, make sure it's sorted. Get half decent quality discs and pads. You do not want to be messing around and cheaping out on safety items like discs, pads, steering, suspension, and tires. Don't be freaking cheaping out on that crap, because you will regret it when the chips are on the table, and you need that to work properly. You need to have that. You need to have at least half decent quality stuff, because you'll thank yourself in the end for having that. But don't listen to Scotty. Make sure your discs and pads are within their service life.
People are forever trying to sell you stuff to say, oh look, your brakes are making noise. A lot of brakes will squeal every now and then, and if you look at them and they're still thick, they're not leaking, they work fine, you can just ignore it. Now these don't squeak at all, because I use those Akabono pads. I like the Akabono pads. They don't make any noise at all. But let's say your car looked like this and it squeaked and it drove you nuts. You could just replace your brake pads with the Akabono, A-K-E-B-O-N-O, the Japanese made pads, and then they won't make any noise if the noise bothers you. That's why, if you care about noise, buy quality brake pads that are quieter. Akabono ceramics are extremely quiet. They don't make any noise. Now, if you don't care about noise, you go to AutoZone, you can buy their cheapest pads.
I'm going to say this once again. Do not cheap out on brakes. Do not cheap out on the cheapest bloody tires you can find. Do not cheap out on steering and suspension. Just don't do it. These are safety items. Don't freaking cheap out on this shit, okay? Saying that, find the cheapest ones. They not the best. Look, if you want to see something, there's a channel called Engineering Explained. He does a full test on brake discs and pads, in a lab. And he shows the difference between like the really, really cheap stuff, the really expensive stuff, and the middle of the range stuff. And just if you don't want to watch it, just I'll tell you what his advice is don't buy the cheapest stuff, because it's super hard, and it makes noise. They're making noise because the discs and because the pads are actually building dust. They usually get very dusty very quickly if you have cheap stuff, and that dust gets in there and actually interferes with the efficiency of your braking. And because they're quite hard and they're quite dusty, you're not going to get the efficiency of the braking. You're going to have longer braking distances. This is proven. Watch Engineering Explained. He actually shows the difference between braking distances. If you go to the more expensive ones where they work better, sometimes they do wear down faster because it's softer, but you actually get better braking distance, but you sacrifice longevity for performance. go middle of the range, like name brand, but mid range, tend to be where you get kind of best of both worlds. You get better longevity and you get better braking distance. And you get very low noise levels because you just don't have to worry every time you hit the brakes you're feeling just screaming. I've done cheap brakes and discs. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm a mechanic. I can risk these things. I know the risks I'm taking. And I can tell you right now, it just wasn't worth it. I mean, while they were okay, got me through at the time in a pinch, they weren't worth it. They made a mess of my front tires on my rims. They're always constantly freaking dirty with brake dust, constantly making noise, and my braking distances weren't actually all that great. So just do not do it. I'm telling you right now, just don't cheap out. He's saying get the cheap freaking AutoZone pads. Don't just for a little bit more money, you get much better. Spend the extra freaking $10-15, whatever, I don't know how much they are. Just spend the extra money, get decent stuff. Don't mess around with your safety. Don't listen to Scotty on this. He's talking shit again. Don't go for the cheap stuff like that. If it's making noise, it's because it's causing a lot of dust, and it's built up. You're gonna have your front tires and rims looking crappy all the time with all sorts of dust and black stuff on it, as well as your braking distances and stuff like that will be affected, as well as you're gonna have that noise, that constant that's gonna be coming up all the time. That it just gets annoying as can be. So just don't listen to Scotty. He's talking shit. Don't take his advice. Listen to me. I'm telling you right now, I'm being straight with you. Just do as I say. All right, just go for them at least in mid-range, and get quality discs and pads and tires and steering suspension stuff. Just don't be messing around with your safety like that and the safety of others.
Actually, they're often harder, and they will actually last longer. The only thing is they're so hard, they make a lot of noise.
Yes, they're harder, make a lot of noise, increasing your braking distances, so it actually takes longer to stop, as well as they're just, and then they'll actually wear your discs down faster, and while they're harder, they don't actually last longer. They'll tend to wear down and it cause loads of dust and stuff like that. Don't get stuff, the cheap stuff. Trust me, just don't listen to Scotty. All right, it will actually affect the performance of your braking. And last thing you want to do is in an emergency situation, however your brakes are insufficient as you should be, because I'm telling you right now, the 1-2 car links can make all the difference between rear-ending somebody and stopping within time, or running into a pedestrian or not running into a pedestrian. It's up to you, but I'm telling you right now, just don't mess around with people's safety, other people's safety, or your own safety.
A lot of people don't like noise, but if you're the type of person you don't care about noise, you turn the radio up, you can go buy the $19 pads at AutoZone. They'll work perfectly fine.
No, they don't work perfectly fine. It will increase your braking distances. Trust me, they will. Look into it. I'm telling you right now. All right, just don't listen to Scotty at all. He's talking shit.
It's just that they'll probably make a lot of noise that drives most people crazy. So don't be sold a load of crap because somebody's trying to make money off you. And of course, another thing related to this is, guys are always trying to sell you front end alignments. This Matrix has never had a front end alignment. It's an 07. The tires wear evenly. It goes down the highway straight. It doesn't pull one way or another. It's not something you really need all that often. Your tires are unevenly worn. This is evenly worn. They're old tires, but they still got tread left on them. If it's all worn out unevenly, yeah, you probably need an alignment. If you're driving down the road and the car pulls to one side or the other, now realize streets drain, and whatever way they drain, your car's going to go a little bit that way. Like if they drain to the right, you let go of the wheel, it'll go a little bit to the right. If it drains to the left, it'll go a little bit way to the left. But if you're going down a flat road and it pulls one way or another, you're going to need an alignment in most cases.
His whole thing about roads draining, yes, roads will have a road crown there so that it allows the water to drain off. A alignment in the area when it comes up, alignment technician, when he does the alignment, actually compensates for the road crown so that your vehicle will drive straight down the road, and it does compensate slightly for road crown depending on if you're driving left or right hand side of the road and how the road crown roads are in your area. Saying that though, it shouldn't drift off to one. If it's drifting off to one side, the alignment actually isn't done right. It should drive straight with road crown, as on your normal roads. Now, obviously, if you're on the highway, where if you're driving on the outside lane, or pardon me, the inside lane, which would be the opposite side of what you normally. So if you're on the left hand lane, or the right hand lane, depending on if you're in, where you live in the world, it may pull a little bit on if you're on the opposite side of the road. But for where your normal road crown is, like on your city streets, it should drive straight despite road crown. And because that's how the specifications and the alignments actually are designed and set up. Any vehicle should be set up like that. So like I said, once again, it depends on where you live and what your roads are like. Where I live here, where we have loads of potholes all over the place, usually you're freaking ducking and dodging them, as well as there are like a lot of speed bumps where some are like only sit on one side or the other. It will throw your alignment out, and as well as depends on the kind of driving you do and how aggressive of driver you are, will affect your alignment. So you may need alignment, but it's always worth sometimes getting a free alignment check or paying for it, because especially I say when you get new tires, get your alignment checked, because it will save you money in the long run just to have it. Even if your tires aren't wearing, but it's out a little bit, it will help stop your tires from wearing as quickly. And if you get decent tires, which you really should try to get the best tires you can afford, then it'll save you money in the long run of having to replace your tires sooner, which is normally a lot more expensive than just having your alignment done. So it's always just a smart thing just to have checked on a sort of semi-regular basis, at least here and there. It depends on kind of where you live and how what roads you live on, you drive on how often you want to have your alignment checked.
Unless you got a flat tire, it's going to pull to that side, or you got a problem in the front end, and I already showed you how to check that to see if it's got play. If you have no play when you jack it up, it doesn't pull, the tires are wearing even, you do not need a front end alignment. And guys are just going to try to sell you that all the time. That's a game that mechanics play. Now I'm going to put the tire back on, but here's another reason. You want to learn how to do stuff yourself, because a lot of guys will use one of these impact wrenches to put it back on. All right, it's fine to take it off, you're just taking it off. But if you use something like that puts out as much as 1,000 foot-pounds of torque, you can end up warping the rotor, wearing the bearing inside and everything. So what you want to do is you want to get a torque wrench. And in this case, 77 foot-pounds or so. Then we'll carefully put the wheel back on so we don't warp anything.
In my years of experience, I've never seen a rotor or a bearing get damaged or warped from just nipping up the wheel nuts or bolts with the impact. I'm not saying freaking hammering the crap out of it, but you should go on, put it up on there, put everything in hand tight, and you go around and just tighten them up, snug them up quickly. Not to freaking hammer on them. You shouldn't hammer on them with the impact, and then go around with the torque wrench and torque them up with your hand, set to a calibrated torque wrench set to the proper torque spec. But I've never seen anything be warped by simply putting it on with the weight off. Now, if you have the weight on and you're trying to put it on, then and do them up, I have seen where that can actually bend wheel studs and can cause problems. But so when you're doing them up, you should go in star patterns. Even with the impact, you start here and you go 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Depends on your say his 5 bolts. Star patterns. You want to go to stars. 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, and then you go around and then you torque it up. See like that. And then I usually go around the star pattern and then I'll go around again to double check and make sure that they're all nice and tight. Just click, 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 click all the way around. But yeah, I've never seen that happen. That's just a load of crap. That's actually just a urban myth. But it doesn't happen unless there's something wrong, further wrong. But and definitely doesn't do your the bearings in the hub by tightening up in a way like that. If the bearing is not going to affect your bearings like that, that's just freaking bullshit. You're just talking crap again.
You line them up. And then first, you just want to put some on finger tight. Now that's on finger tight, we'll put the jack down with the emergency brake on, and we will tighten them until they click. Okay, that one's done. and you do a cross bolt pattern. One side then cross to the other. And back over to the other side.
Just like to point something out here. You listen to Scotty, it goes click and goes ding, ding. He's actually over torquing those bolts because it should go click and you should hear go clink and it can come off. He's actually going click and you can see him still putting pressure on. He's actually over torquing his bolts. So he's like he's trying to claim that he's doing this correctly and is actually doing the wrong thing. He's actually over torquing his wheel nuts. So I just like to point that out.
And then down to the last one. And here's another trick. If you got nice wheels like this, these center hubs, get a little silicone clear sealer. On the little lips you can see where it sits on. Put a little clear silicone sealer on a few of these lips, because then it won't fall off later on. If you hit a big bump, they get old, they can get a little bit touchy. So when you snap them on, line them up like this, now it's snapped in place and it won't fall off. Now I'm going to switch gears and warn you about a maintenance item that they tell you don't need anymore. And that is, well, your transmission has lifetime fluids in it. You don't need to change it ever. Now sure, transmission oil doesn't get as dirty as engine oil, because engine oil is in the engine. It's burning gasoline, impurities get it, and you got to change it every 5,000 miles or so if you use pure synthetic oil. But transmission fluid will eventually get dirty. Dirt is friction. It will wear your transmission out. So why do they say it's a lifetime fluid? Well, they mean that the fluid is good for the lifetime of the transmission. But of course, ask them what the warranty of the transmission is. Probably 50, 60,000 miles, right? I mean, my old Celica's in '94. It's got 240,000 miles on it. It still shifts fine because I change the fluid every 30, 40,000 miles. The dealerships would just love it if your transmission went out after the warranty period was over. Then they could sell you thousands and thousands of dollars of work or a remanufactured transmission for thousands and thousands of dollars. Or say, oh yeah, just buy another car. You need another car, right? Planned obsolescence at it.
Just like to quickly point out, that's actually more down to the manufacturers than it is actually down to the dealership or the mechanic shop. It's the manufacturer's service interval and the manufacturer saying it's a lifetime transmission fluid. Now I worked at a Hyundai dealership for a while and we had some on our transmissions. And we knew better. We did try to advise customers that, look, yeah, this is lifetime, but it's not, it isn't his lifetime of the gearbox, not lifetime of you or the car itself. And we knew it was wrong, but the manufacturer didn't have a service interval for that transmission because they seen it as a lifetime fluid, lifetime for it. We knew it was shite. We did tell the customers it was shite, but the fact is, it's down to the manufacturer and what their specifications are and their service intervals, as well as did they design the transmission to be serviced, and did they, and what fluid is that they put in there. They class it as a lifetime fluid. It was rather expensive to have done, but we did actually try to advise our customers to have it done, and we just tried to make up a service interval that we tried to look at other gearboxes with the manufacturer and tried to say, okay, look, it needs to be done around about this time. So but I said he's trying to say this is for mechanics or repair shops trying to rip people off. That's down to the manufacturer, not the shop or your mechanic who's doing that. It's mechanics in the shops and even dealerships are limited on sometimes on what the manufacturer recommends and what they do. They put it out there. So just like to point that out, that's a manufacturing issue, a manufacturer issue, and not a shop or dealership issue.
At its best. Now the old-fashioned transmissions like in this Matrix are real easy. Drain the plug, you could drop the pan and clean it if you wanted, but you could change the drain plug and then you just add the fluid and a dipstick hole. So that closes the case on how not to get ripped off by dishonest shops. Hey, they've got overhead. They've got to pay insurance. They have to mint money in order to keep themselves going and make a hefty profit. Guys are always trying them. They will probably continue ad infinitum trying to.
I kind of do agree with Scotty on that. Look, in the end, a mechanic shop or dealership or whatever is a business. Okay, they need to make money. They need to make money because they do have bills to pay. They have overhead they have to cover. They have employees who also have their own bills to pay, their own families to pay. Now, I'm not advocating to say that that shops should rip the customers off. By no means would I ever advocate that. I don't. I actually try to preach against that. Saying that though, mechanics and shops will advise, it's called upsell. Sometimes it is like extra stuff for maintenance, and if advised correctly, and the shop is like looking after the customers, are actually valuable and will actually help extend the life of your vehicle and help it to last longer with and save you money in the long run, because you have less repair bills, because things will be won't wear out as quickly, and you can stay on top of of items that maybe coming up that and to maintain the vehicle better. And down the road, it'll help your vehicle run better, less repair costs, and actually better resale value as well. So I would just like to say that, but like I said, they are a business, and businesses do need to make money, and it's just kind of the fact of it. Anybody watching this, like if you work, whatever you're doing, you need to make money, and the company you work for needs to make money, and that's the whole point of being a business, is to grow and make better. But as I said, any good shop, most shops are going to be reputable, well-run businesses who want to look after the customers, have good word of mouth, and have a good reputation. Because in automotive industries, it's one of the specific ones. Reputation is a massive thing, and to have a good reputation goes a very, very long way. So, but yeah, he is right. Shops are in it to make money, because that's how you stay in business.
Trying to rip people off. And I do have to say, so far I'm pretty impressed. Let's run this impact a little while to see how long it'll run before it starts pumping again.
I just like to point something out there. Listen to his impact. As soon as he pulled it, give it 2 seconds, you already heard the power drop on that impact. So that air tank is already losing pressure just by having holding that for how long stuff, 1,000, 2,000, 3, maybe 3 4 seconds, and then it's already starting to lose power. And then obviously the compressor, because it's going to drop down, the compressor's going to a certain level, it's going to want to build the pressure back up, but you're already losing enough that where you're hearing the audible drop in power on that impact almost instantly. So it's just not going to have the power as what it should be. That impact isn't going to be able to pump out as much, and it's not going to hit as hard, and so it will struggle against anything that has any kind of resistance to it. I would like to see him try to use it on an axle nut and see how hard it is, how much it how long it takes to get it off, because I think it'll struggle really, really bad if he gets it off at all.
Okay, there it goes. And really, for an air compressor, that's pretty quiet. And the design is all made out of plastic, which of course is a lot quieter than metal. The only thing I'm worried about is, will it hold up over time? So I'm going to use the heck out of this thing, see how long it lasts. Now we'll wait till it shuts off. And it shut off. There it goes.
And listening to that, it doesn't sound any quieter than any small little DIY compressor I've ever seen or used. I got one at home that I use for just some basic things like that, but I don't use it for the impact because I have my DeWalt, which is much better and actually puts out quite a bit of power. And I know you said, it shut off quite quickly, but then it's a very, very small tank, so that's going to fill up really, quite fast. It's not going to hold a lot of air, so it not going to stay on very long to refill the tank, because it's a small tank. So yeah, it's gonna come on quickly, and it's gonna take not very long for it's gonna fill up and get back to pressure, because it's a small compressor. So yeah, wow. Great. Small compressor fills fast. Good job, Scotty. Alright, so thanks for watching, and hope you enjoyed my video. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Click down below on the like button. Comment down below. Let me know what you think of this. Let me know if there's anything else. And I'm gonna try to do more repair videos and trying to build this channel up so that I can actually maybe look at me doing a lot more repair videos and start investing more into this. If this channel starts paying a little bit, then I'll start investing more time, because then that's going to start actually making sense for me to actually invest time. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I will see you again.